Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the Dude, Where's My Code podcast. We finally came up with a name that we're pretty excited about, so we're going to roll with that. My name's Nick Cosentino. I'm an engineering manager at Microsoft, and I have with me here Graham Harvey. Hey, Graham.
Hey, yeah, my name's Graham, and currently I'm an engineering manager at a California startup called One Build.
Awesome. So, Graham and I were just recently talking about team composition, how we look to staff teams, the different roles and the makeup of those roles on teams. And we thought that would be a really interesting topic to talk about for today. I think we have some different experiences and some similar experiences with teams, and we figured maybe we'd jump into like something that's it sounds like it's a little bit more relevant for both of us, so like an overlapping experience with team composition. Does that sound okay, Graham?
Yeah, I think that nails it.
Cool. Yeah, do you want to kind of explain your current maybe situation that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, well, currently managing a data team. So by nature, you're data focused and back end focused. Um, but we are still contributing to a product. It is still customer facing. So in that regard, it is very much the same as many other product teams. We are super small right now, which adds an additional complication. That's always interesting to talk about when what's the ideal team size
Right. Yeah.
for what you're
Yeah.
trying to accomplish. Um, but yeah, I mean that's where we're at right now. We will be adding more soon. I currently have I think three engineers on the team, this specific team.
Right.
But yeah, we're going to look to add more soon. So I'm doing a lot of thinking about what type of engineers am I looking for? How do we balance kind of that scale of junior through senior through lead?
Right.
What kind of skills do you want on a team like this or other teams I've led? I'm just trying to kind of think and put all that together. So that's
Sure.
that's what I'm wrestling with right now.
Cool. And maybe something that we can kind of share and talk through. Like, obviously, we don't want to go into like very specific details of maybe things that are company secrets or something. But if it's private, feel free to skip over it. But in terms of like, product space, is it something that you would say is pretty mature? Is it coming like right off the ground?
I mean, the company itself is only a couple years old. Now that they found product market fit, I should say we, not they.
Yeah.
I am part of the team now. It's really funny being a new member of a team and starting to be part of it. So, yeah, a couple years old, have found product market fit, and now it's kind of learning from the lessons we've learned and kind of taking that and applying it to building a more mature and scalable product.
Okay.
So, when you're an early startup, you kind of like hack something together more or less to see if it solves the problem before you really invest in a longer term and more mature solution. So we're at that kind of like building a longer term, more mature solution.
Cool.
Um, and so, yeah, it is very much new, fresh, and kind of ground up product.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, new and fresh, but without the we're doing this for the very first time. Like, we might not even know exactly what we're doing yet. It's really just kind of starting to form that. Is that fair to say?
We know the solution. There's prior art,
Cool.
but the services are, yeah, they're a ground up build.
Okay, awesome. And before I jump into kind of maybe sharing a similar like setting, are you able to kind of share maybe the composition in terms of tenure and seniority of the engineers that you have on your team?
Yeah, I mean, this particular team is not. It's a real solid intermediate team.
Cool.
So being small, especially when you're a startup. I mean, it depends. I guess it depends on the startup. My experience has been a lot of the early teams are made up of teams that skew more junior.
Right.
And so what's really great now is we're in a really good position with some really talented engineers all kind of building this, but we don't have, this is a team of three, but we don't have anybody who kind of outsizes being a technical leader, and we don't have anyone who skews towards intern or new grad. Everyone's kind of very much a nice, like, well rooted, well experienced engineer.
Cool, and I think thanks for sharing that because I think something that we'll probably want to touch on when it comes to composition. You kind of mentioned at the beginning of this, right? Like seniority, tenure. If you have like very junior people on the team, it's not like that's a bad thing, but like depending on how junior they are, that could absolutely come with like you're teaching people how to be in a company. They might not have actually worked in a company before, and it sounds kind of funny to say they could be rock star, coders, like engineers, and whatever facets you're looking at, but they just may not have experience like with some of the things like I need to do pull requests with people. I need to like think about how I'm, designing stuff with other team members like that. Sometimes things you're investing into and didn't actually consider, right?
It's a lot different doing a school group project versus a product that is supposed to be mature and money making
Right.
and built on solid foundations and last. It's not
Right.
just for a grade, right?
Right. But of course, like we'll get into that because that's actually, something about making a team that you want to, continue to grow and give opportunities even to more senior engineers and things like that. Um, So maybe I'll briefly just share like it's obviously we're at different companies, so it's not the same situation, but a similar kind of setting for me is that I recently took on a second team, and that team is well established, and they're going through a transition phase where this team over the course of a couple of years is actually being broken into a second team. The second team is just an entirely different space. But they were taking some engineers from let's call it team X, and they were moving them to team Y to go do some other work. And so team X, their manager has also gone to team Y. They're kind of like I said, splitting up. And what's kind of interesting now is this team X that I've inherited. They're kind of like Graham, as you mentioned. I think I have some what I would call like intermediate senior, like solid folks, and it's split across two geos. So this is the interesting part for me. In one geo, I have two folks that are I would say are quite solid. I don't have like a very junior person or like a principal engineer that's been at the company for 100 years and they know absolutely everything. But solid, so that's pretty good. But it's only two people. The other geo that I have, I think, is five people, and also a similar kind of composition where they're solid. I don't have very very junior people. I don't have like principal or staff level engineers. So pretty solid. But the interesting part that I'm going to have to work through is this. I think what's top of mind for me is this dynamic where there's not an equal balance between two geos, and that's important for us because we do have a live service. We do have, it's an established service. It's well established, which I'm very fortunate for. But we're kind of looking at different ways to support that imbalance between being able to support a live service across two geos. So I think that's an interesting thing that I'm kind of looking at. And then going forward, for the other team I have, where I would say pretty well balanced across geos, like, and they're the same geos, which is interesting. But when I compare it to the original team that I had before this one, the engineering efforts and everything can be quite balanced because we have equal representation in multiple geos. So it's kind of this cool, like, it feels like your team is working around the clock because as one team is signing off for the day, the other team's just getting ramped up, and it's just this really cool, constantly making progress feeling. So I'm hoping to achieve something like that with this new team that I've inherited.
Is the concern of the imbalance, is this about um, being able to keep a service up and running smoothly, or is it about kind of that continuity of productivity across,
Yeah,
the two
good,
teams?
good question. I think very initially was like a concern about like, hey, how can we like do the the health of the service? How can we make sure that we're holding a really high bar for that? But we did. I think we kind of found some strategies for working through that. We're actually going to be leveraging some of the other teams that had very new people that were they didn't have a lot of history with some of the other service stuff. So we're not basically eroding some other place to help with this one. We're actually like using it to accelerate people to ramp up and help. And because this particular service, I would say, is quite well like um, it's not automatic like in terms of how it handles errors and stuff, but it feels like pretty good. So you can bring on more junior people, you can walk them through and get them ramped up. So I feel like we handled I don't want to say that's like resolved, but I feel like we have a strategy for that that feels pretty good. And I think my next concern will be the other thing you mentioned, which is like, cool, now we're getting into the groove. Like, how do we make sure that we have this feeling of continuity across geos, if that makes sense?
Yeah, we on a previous team were talking about how to handle having engineers spread across time zones and geographies. And one of my favorite opportunities that that presents is the ability to share that productivity. And we dove into these experiments where we didn't like assigning owners to individual, Jira tickets or whatever
Sure.
your software tracking system is. Uh, we didn't like thinking of things as like individual task ownership. And it started to be this really cool opportunity for treating the geos as kind of this like ongoing ability to be building stuff, and it's always the most important stuff. And so
Right.
you're not saying like, well, I'm signing off for the end of the day, I guess I will finish that task tomorrow. You make sure that your code is pushed up, it's well documented, nothing's in a completely broken state, your Jira card or whatever is updated, and whoever is coming online can actually pick that up and just continue running with it. And you might come in the next day and the PR is up because it's been completed by another engineer.
Right.
Um, Really, really cool dynamic, and I think is seizing kind of the best parts of having, ongoing time zone coverage, which is things ship faster.
Right, yeah, and I love that idea, right? And I think if I this new team that I've kind of taken on, it's a relatively new thing for me. So if I compare the other team I have and use the examples you just gave, um, I think that our on call live site issue remedy kind of thing, that whole life cycle is very much. To your point, this very continuous, like it feels awesome. You just feel like at all times of day you have the right people looking. It's getting late for you. You're about to reach the end of your on call shift, but like the next team is like they're already online. You're getting them ramped up. It feels good. But what's interesting, at least on that team that I have, is the individuals have very much gravitated towards they actually do enjoy working on things separately. And I think I'm kind of speculating here because like we talked about in our last conversation that we recorded, like I would think as an engineer, I personally like this idea of like very much like trying to work together, work in a team. Like I'm gonna pass the baton, you pass it back, kind of thing. There's a sports reference, I guess, but you know, I think what I'm noticing with these individuals is that they're actually getting more fulfillment out of being able to put their head down and focus on their work. Now, there've certainly been instances where it's obviously beneficial to have the other geo kind of pick up when you're coming offline, and we really notice it when there's an on-call or a live site issue because if you don't have anyone in the other geo that knows anything about what you're doing, how can they actually do a good job supporting this? So it's almost like I don't know. I don't want to like too much of a tangent here, but Graham, I know you and I have talked about like for folks that don't like putting in regression testing of any kind, it's kind of like they have to prove to themselves over time that like you keep having this painful experience and you're like if you just put the tests in, if you just put the tests in and finally they're like fine, I'll test it and then like things just kind of start to get better. I don't know. I don't want to like prescribe it for them, but I kind of feel like this might be a realization they come to.
This is something that I have worked with, I think, every team since I've become a manager on, which is this idea that like if you have to that you a team has to support whatever it is you're shipping,
Right.
and you have individuals holding the on-call pager at any given time, it's almost unfair to expect them to be able to support things that you as an individual are shipping.
Right.
You are like, this is why we encourage engagement on code reviews, right? Understand a lot of the standards of teams we've worked on, or I've worked on, has been when you're PRing or you're code reviewing a PR, you don't just read the code, you pull that branch down locally, you build it, you run it, you get familiar with
Sure.
how the system works, at a minimum, and quality checking it while you're doing that. So you're not just like, hey, how does this code structure look, but how does it function? What's the quality of it? Um, and that's for me kind of been the biggest uh, point of discussion I've had with individuals who do like having that sense of this is mine and I want to see it through to completion. And I start talking about, well, what does seeing it through to completion mean? Because if you hit merge at the end of the day, your test pass, the system goes green, everything works, and you say, great, my day's over, I've shipped my thing. And then at midnight, something goes haywire. It's because of what you shipped. I mean, the on-call individual has little they can do except rule that change back out and
Right.
not be able to address it until you're in. And it's just not a great place for a team to be.
Sure, yeah.
So that's kind of where we've started with that kind of discussion.
So that's interesting. Okay, so if we back up a little bit and we talk about team compositions, in an ideal state, it kind of sounds like, and this probably depends on what you're building, right? If it's something like a live service that needs support, ideally for you, you're kind of looking at, if you can, maybe it's multiple teams or a single team across multiple geos. Is that kind of something that you would be after?
I think that's it's really cool. I think you can use it to your benefit. I don't think you have to pursue it
Okay.
necessarily, but when you have the opportunity, recognizing that where this comes from for me is I've heard so many discussions post-pandemic when teams have gone remote about how difficult it is and how frustrating it is to manage across time zones
Right.
and all the synchronous type work that people are trying to continue promoting as synchronous work instead of embracing like the asynchronicity of remote teams. I'm like, hold on, there's a whole advantage here that we didn't have when we all got together in the same office and started at 9 a.m. and
Sure.
finished at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
So I see it as an opportunity, not necessarily something that we want. There are advantages to having time zone co-located and geo co-located teams as well. So for me, it's look for the benefits of the opportunities that you have.
Right. I also just realized that this entire conversation I've had in a windowed mode and not actually full screen, which is pretty not great. So yeah, it's interesting that given the opportunity, if you wanted to, um, structure a team, if you had this chance where you could say like, I want to build it out, you wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to go say, cool, it's a live service. Let's say I'm gonna go start hiring people in a different time zone. You would,
Yeah, man, it depends because you've got the whole concept of, someone has to be if you want to be a managed SaaS service with
right.
good uptime reliability, like you have to have someone holding the pager all the time. So like, is it a benefit to have business hour coverage across time zones so no one really feels like they're holding the pager at 2 a.m. their time? Like, yeah, sounds fantastic.
Right.
Um, at the same time, embracing asynchronicity isn't necessarily forced by having cross time zones. My favorite example of this was talking to an engineer where he observed Ramadan,
Okay.
and so there was actually times where he had to stay up late, various reasons, and so he said, I actually, especially at times of fasting, you know, enjoy getting up in the middle of the night and doing work because that's a better time for me. So he's in the same time zone as the rest of the team, but actually the best fit for him at that moment in time of the year is to work maybe 2, 3, 4 hours a day with the rest of the team, make sure he's present for the meetings, and then get his kind of productive coding work done at a completely off business hour. So
What a cool way to lean into just like differences, right? Like that's awesome. That's cool that that could be like leveraged, I guess, or like it works for him too, right? It works for everyone. That's awesome.
and we see it as an opportunity to get the best productivity, the best working conditions from our people. So,
Right. Yeah,
um,
that's super cool. So I'm curious. Okay, so we're both kind of in a maybe a similar situation of team composition. Then the I mentioned geos on my side. I have slightly different numbers in one of my geos, let's say, but we both kind of have people that are intermediate, kind of senior range, and like pretty solid. Feels really good. What's next? You're talking about I only got 3 people on the team. You're probably going to want to scale that up, it sounds like. So, you know, where would you go from there? Would you start to hire just more senior, kind of middle ground? Would you start looking for more junior? Would you like if you could, if you could be picky and choosy about what would come next?
it is a very interesting question. I think it totally depends on circumstance. So if I speak to where we are at right now, we have two interesting things. We are a data team. One of my three engineers is, by role, a data engineer. And I think we have a lot of investments we want to make in data engineering. So for me, right, I want to focus on a data engineering type skill set.
Right.
And I just don't think with the opportunities and the challenges that lie ahead of us, we unfortunately don't have time as a team with a single data engineer currently to hire someone junior who has to learn a lot of the ropes about
Mm,
taking things that they've learned and then applying it practically to an organization that's trying to mature their data strategy, put a bunch of data infrastructure in place, and continue to invest in new features that rely heavily on the data that we have. So it's I, I view it as an unfair proposition to try and throw a more
sure.
junior individual into that.
Right.
So, you know, hand is forced a little bit into having someone who has some of the experiences in the things we're trying to do because of the speed that we have to move and apply those things. Having said that, we do also have stuff that isn't just data pipelines, and so we
Okay.
have a lot of backend services and customer facing services. So in that realm, that's where my other two engineers excel currently.
Okay.
And if we were to invest in that area uh, while we're growing the team, then I want to give every opportunity to the existing individuals to grow in their role as much as they want to. And so if those individuals aspire to senior staff engineering leadership levels, then it is our duty as an organization to hire in um, more junior engineers to,
Right.
to give our existing individuals opportunities to mentor, opportunities to expand their realm of responsibility. And so in that sense, yeah, that's where we have an opportunity to bring more junior people in and lean on the experience of the existing intermediate and seniors that we have today.
That's cool. And at some point, I definitely want to have a full-on conversation with you about like that thing you mentioned of it's our duty to bring on more junior people so we can help elevate our more senior folks because I don't think that a lot of people necessarily see it this way. Um, I'm sure there are lots that do, but I don't think it's a rule. I can tell you it's not a rule because I've seen it not be a rule, but I think it's a really I don't know, like a succinct way, in my opinion, to kind of say something we probably both agree on about, like, bringing out the best in people.
This is where I'm going to get a little confused because you and I have talked about this, and I don't remember if it was on the last
Sure.
time we recorded or not. But for me, the last couple of organizations I worked at have been very aligned about how you progress through IC engineering levels, and
Sure.
I really subscribe to them. And for my personal belief, when you hit somewhere, and I mean everyone titles their roles differently, which makes this hard. But when you kind of start to hit that senior level, everything above that for me, that growth is about making everybody around you better, right?
Right.
Making the team better, making the product better by influencing, being what a lot of people refer to as a force multiplier. And so if you to expand your role need to collaborate with more engineers, right? Mentor others to grow their skill sets, to be more efficient, to kind of hit that high performance team characteristics. You have to have the opportunity to do that. If you're a team of one, I mean, most probably aren't, but imagine that you are. Where's the opportunity to multiply those around you? And so that's kind of where that duty comment comes from is if we've established this career progression that is expecting engineers to be able to influence those around them, help grow those around them, it's very difficult to do that if you are only hiring technical leadership and people who have more experience than
Right.
them. Of course, anybody can teach anybody, but far and away, if we're hiring technical leaders in, we're not giving our intermediate engineers a lot of opportunity to mentor, grow, and influence beyond kind of the maybe the business knowledge that they've established just with their tenure at the organization. But when that runs out, where do they have to go?
Right. I think the only way you could make that latter case work where you are hiring in like more senior people above is like if the way that you, and I don't actually know if this makes sense or not, but if the rate and the way that you were growing was such that, hey, we have hired in someone senior, but we actually want to take you and move you to another team and kickstart something kind of new and fresh, and that could be a cool growth opportunity where they're almost like bringing in, say, someone external to like call it like backfill you or like fill that niche that you were filling while they give you more responsibility. That could be really cool, but I feel like more often than not, and I mean, when we have lots of listeners and stuff, I'm sure there's going to be listeners that will say, like, I have been in situations where I thought that I was making progress along some track, and then someone was brought in, and it was like, boom, right above me. It kind of feels that way, right? And you're like, I thought that I was progressing to fill this. What happens to my opportunity? So, anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, but I thought it was really cool that you kind of brought that up because to your point, okay, so you have this team of intermediates and senior, kind of middle ground, feels pretty solid. Bringing in someone junior currently may not be very fair because you'd have to spend time ramping them up, and it's just not going to be really that effective at the current state. So with that said, do you look, are you going to maybe focus on? I know it's going to be situational and how opportunities arise, but would you look to actually bring in someone more senior, like above the current group that you have, or would you kind of add more to that middle realm and kind of let it evolve maybe a little bit more naturally?
What I'm actually looking for in the next couple of hires is it's an interesting question to think about when you ask it, because what I'm looking for is to fill existing knowledge gaps in the things that we want to move quickly in,
Okay.
right? So absolutely love investing in engineers' skills growth and opportunities to step into roles or build things they haven't maybe had developed
Right.
expertise in yet. I think that's a fantastic thing. When you're trying to move quickly, for example, like we want a more mature data lake and data warehousing strategy.
Okay.
Okay, so we have some of that, but if we could look for an individual who has experience in the specific technologies we think we need to leverage, or building the kind of thing that we want to build, I don't know if I would be thinking a whole lot about how much past experience they have. Where do they fall on the junior, intermediate, senior
Mm,
scale? As much as how much experience do they have in the things I am looking for?
interesting.
So it's I suspect that you're not going to find a junior who has a ton of experience in those things. But let's say we do, fantastic, because it's not about time in seat. It's about
Right.
the things they built and the experience that they have or would be bringing to the team.
Right.
So
So if I can maybe phrase it a different way, then the lens that you would be looking at to hire through is not so much of a seniority thing. And obviously, titles are one thing, but whatever. Let's call it that, intermediate senior range. You're actually looking to hire for skill sets and past experiences, and I'm assuming that obviously you layer onto that the general qualities that you're after, and just bringing someone to your team. So I know you didn't say that specifically, but it's not like you'd be like, hey, this person is totally mean and stuff to everyone, but great data lake skills, so like definitely bringing them in. That stuff is obviously assumed, that you're looking for the right fit in general. So that's interesting, and I think that's pretty neat, right? Because it probably does afford you, on one hand, less flexibility because you're looking for a specific skill set versus just the very general, like junior, senior, intermediate, whatever. Um, and yeah, so yeah, just a
here's
different
the
lens.
here's the caveat, which is throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Of course.
Um, the way we build, or the way I have built teams, and would like to continue building teams, actually stems from something that my previous manager director at Circle CI, taught me, which was we really, to be an effective team, want to be delivering the thing that is of highest value to our customers,
Right.
basically at all times, right? And so whether we are a data and backend team, or my former team being a data backend and front end customer facing team, I really struggle with hiring in individuals just for specific skill sets.
Hmm.
Because what that does is, if you take an example of you're in your sprint planning and you say, we have a velocity of 20 story points a sprint, right? And we've got four engineers, and two of them are back end engineers, and two of them are front end engineers by title or by role, by expectation. We have to go and say, okay, well, I guess we got to pull in 10 points worth of back end stories and 10 points worth of front end stories. And if nothing that we're working on right now for the customer is a front end facing feature, it's basically filler. Like
Right.
it's second tier work for what we should be doing.
Just so that you can optimize the amount of work that you can fit in to your planning.
Right. So even when I'm looking for, my next data engineer with specific skills in building data lakes and data warehouses, I'm still looking for an individual who is willing to say, I like this team's mission. I like
Right.
what this team is trying to accomplish, and I'm here for it. And so while we can prioritize the tasks they get to help lean into the existing skills they have, I expect that if the next top ticket in the backlog is build a new API, then like that's what you're going to do if you're looking for work.
Right.
And we accept that it'll take some engineers more time to accomplish those tasks than those who are experts in it.
Sure.
But that's kind of how you get that organic skills growth. That thing we talked about earlier, where we want everyone on the team to understand how everything works so they can hold the pager. That happens so much more organically when everybody's kind of involved in everything and not sitting in their front end, back end data silos.
Right. And for anyone that's listening or watching and they start to panic and freak out about like how are you possibly going to give someone, with less experience in something this work item, they have to go do it. That's going to take them so much longer. How are you going to estimate that? That's going to throw everything off. If you just do it, it balances out. And if you don't believe me, try it and then come back and let's hear it. Because it sounds scary, right? Because if you have someone that could be perfect, the best fit to go do this work, you want to go put them on it. But it's not always going to line up that way. I would say, obviously exceptions to everything. If you're, critical thing needs to be delivered and you're like it's got to go out, you probably do want to prioritize things differently. But to Graham's point, like you have this very natural like learning, and I think this really ties into something Graham and I were chatting about a little bit before we turned on the recording here, which is like being a generalist. Like there's a lot of power in like general skill sets, like being a uh, you know having I think there's a term for it, right? And I think they probably call it like T-shaped. I know. Yeah, I see you nodding, Graham. Is that something that you've heard the phrase and everything?
I, yeah, I've used this a lot now that I've been building teams like this.
Right.
I heard a great talk some years ago at a conference, and I wish I could remember who to attribute it to. And so hopefully they reach out to me if they hear this and say like that was me. But there was this talk of like T-shaped developers
Right.
where you kind of know everything or most things, but you've kind of got your specialty. The analogy that I really liked from this conference talk was talking about kind of broken comb shaped developers or broken comb shaped engineers.
Okay.
So you picture kind of you've got that comb, but a few of the teeth are broken off, and so you actually have expertise in kind of growing areas,
Right.
some more than others. But the T shape implies you kind of know surface level knowledge about everything, and you have one thing you care about. And this broken comb analogy allows the expansion of like, well, it's not a T, it's kind of like it's a pie shape or whatever we need to use to
Right.
visualize that kind of ability to grow your depth of skills kind of across the gamut.
Right. So okay. So I think this is interesting, right? So we're kind of parking the seniority tenure thing for right this moment because this part of what we're focusing on is really like where your skills lie. So um, I think Graham and I have agreed before that like our perspective is really like if you had okay, so say you had a team of 5 people, just as an example. If you had 5 people that were just very good at one thing and one thing only and nothing else, it would probably be extremely difficult to make any meaningful progress because you would have stuff come up and it's like no one would be able to do anything. But if you have like if you start to just introduce like more general knowledge and like more general experience where people are at least comfortable to like to jump into tasks, they don't have to be an expert on it, but if they can jump into it, they're open to it. It might be new. It's a learning thing for them. They know that there's other resources they might be able to lean on in a pinch, that kind of thing. You start to have Graham was kind of using this example of like your sprint planning and stuff. You can actually get people to make progress on the important things and not just like, well, you know, Joe is tied up with, you know, thing X that he's an expert in, and Sally's tied up with thing Y, and like, guess we have to just bring in garbage so that the other people can work on stuff. Like, no, like that's not. No one wants to organize priorities that way. So being a bit more general can actually really be powerful in terms of just getting things done.
I've seen examples where, teams are in a hurry to build a new UI for a
Sure.
feature, and they overload the team with specific experience. Maybe they're rewriting their UI in React and they pull in a whole bunch of React experience, and the feature kind of gets built and the UI is done and polished and everyone's kind of happy with it. And suddenly the requirements for all this kind of front end polishing and development work dry up,
Right.
and you're left with a team loaded up with skills and no real direction for that.
And
And
that
then what do you end up doing? You break up the team, or you know,
and there's this, like, you know, we talk about just being in management, you pay more attention to these kinds of things, but there is literally like a time and money cost to building and forming a team, right? Like, so if you were to do that, and you know, let's just pick some numbers, right? A team of 6, and you added 3 more specific like React front end engineers on top of your existing 3, for example, just making things up. Now you end up with like 3 totally stacked like React UI devs, and that amount of work, as you said, is dried up. You basically paid in time and money and resources, right, to be able to get these individuals ramped up. They understand the domain that you're working in. They understand, like, you know, how to work. Like, this is something that no one, I feel like no one measures this, but how to work with other people, like, it's huge. Like, there's the time you have to spend understanding how people work. So learning how others work on the team, learning about the domain that you're in, um, yeah, and then just getting to this point where you're like, cool, no more or minimal work for the 3 of you to kind of to go between. If those individuals didn't have other general experiences, or if they weren't like able and willing to kind of pick up new things and get ramped up, because that's the other thing I just briefly wanted to mention is I don't think it's an expectation that you know a little bit of everything else, but you have to be willing and able to, like, I don't know that, I'm gonna jump into it. My opinion at least. But yeah, if you had 3 individuals like that that could not jump into other stuff, what do you do? Like, go form a new team, just let them go? Like, there's so much cost to being able to ramp those individuals up. So
I think what you're most likely to see is the creation of busy work or tasks that don't need to be done,
right.
just for the sake of, well, we've got people to do it. And so we start looking further down the list of value add to something that we can just do.
Right. So if you
Uh,
go back to your other point about how do we fill the sprint with work to do, well, you have these 3 React experts, right? Well, you know they can jump onto these work items, but they were at the bottom of the bucket, so like, yeah, they're gonna get done. That's cool. You're gonna see your story points stay high. That's cool. But like, you know, we could do whole other talks about like how you're actually measuring the value you're delivering. That might not be
that
the most high priority.
that is a really good point. There's a difference between a team continually pumping out work and delivering value.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that is interesting.
Okay, so a little bit of recap so far. We talked about, in your situation, currently bringing on someone more junior may not be optimal. Um, so you would actually be looking for, you know, particular skill sets that you could build on. Ideally, this person's also a bit of a generalist, right? Because as you are making progress in that area for you, you're discussing data lakes and that kind of thing. As you get that kind of covered, great, other people on the team start to pick it up too. But this individual that you would be prioritizing to hire, they're also able to kind of pick up some other stuff as well. Um, you know, this concept of, you know, being T-shaped. Love the broken comb analogy. I think that's really cool. I'm going to use that one a little bit more. So we're kind of talking about like skills, and I think that's pretty cool. One of the other things we started talking about at the beginning was kind of like seniority, right? So one of the things I was curious about in your situation, right? So at what point would you kind of be thinking more about trying to look at the individuals you have on the team, and for the ones that are more senior, like how do you go about, maybe, and I don't know how to kind of phrase this, maybe you can kind of help fill in some gaps, but you go from forming this team to, you know, insert something here to like, hey, it's a well-established team. I'm giving a lot of like career opportunities to people. Everything's just like really well-oiled machine. If it can reach that state, like what does that evolution look like in terms of the people that you bring on and the experience? It's a loaded question, but
Um, is it loaded? What's what are you looking for?
oh well, I mean, like maybe there's a lot of different things you can. I don't think it was a trick question, sorry, but I think there's a lot of different parts to that may or may not be things that you kind of focus on.
Yeah, I mean, you ideally want to constantly be growing everybody in your team,
Right.
right? So no matter where you bring them in at, junior, intermediate, senior, staff, leadership, whatever, you want them to be growing. I'm not sure that any team can sustain everybody's continued growth all the time. That's
Right.
like you want to provide that, but the only way to provide that is to give them avenues to move wherever they need to get where they want to get in their career. And I think that's a really interesting part about being a manager, um, is getting invested in the success of the people on your
Right.
team. Maybe at all costs. I've actually told people in past, like, hey, listen, like my job as a manager is I'm number one accountable to you, then to this team, then to this company, right? So if that means the best opportunities for you are on this team, fantastic. We'll keep making sure there's opportunities for you here as long as we can. If we can't, okay, well, we will look outside our team because we want to keep you in the organization. We want you to be here. So what other opportunities can we get? Maybe you have to move to another manager if it's not another team of mine.
Right.
Um, Great, let's make that happen. But lastly, if there is no opportunities for your career growth the way you want it here at this organization, I will help you get what you need elsewhere with no hard feelings. That's been a very interesting conversation to have, and it tends to shock people, which makes me think it's not the norm.
Right.
Um, but yeah, you've got juniors who want to be intermediates, intermediates who want to be seniors, seniors who want to be staff, seniors who want to be management,
Hmm.
right? And so, yeah, you're constantly looking for opportunities to get those people where they want. And for me, it's always been, does that opportunity exist here on this team? Does it
Right.
exist on one of my other teams? Does it exist somewhere else in the org or not? Um,
And you,
I don't know if that's going where you were hoping to
yeah, yeah,
go.
for sure. Yeah, and yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know, maybe this is just too much to throw out in the air, but yeah, it kind of sounds like maybe I can ask it to you, but like, given the state of this team that you're talking about, it sounds like you're going through a particular phase where you are kind of focused on, um, a part of the product life cycle or service life cycle where you're building something out, it needs some attention. Um, it's not that you're taking away people's opportunities to progress or anything like that, but it might not be a hyper focus because maybe what you would do is bring on someone junior and all the intermediate people can mentor them and you'd say, great, look, boom. But so you're kind of trying to grow out the team with some skill sets. It might be, and this is where the question part comes in, maybe something where you're looking at where these folks are, the intermediate senior people you have, and maybe saying, look, if I can get a few more people on the team, like by the time this person's maybe ready for some mentoring opportunities, we could start bringing on some more junior folks. You're kind of thinking in the future, like you probably need maybe one or two more people on the team to sustain it, then maybe bring on a junior person or something. And again, I know you said you weren't looking at it through the lens of junior senior, but maybe at that point it shifts a little bit to like, we know we need some more help, and maybe actually looking for someone more junior could be advantageous. I can't speak, so that you can start to elevate the people on the team. Is that maybe something you would be looking at?
I'm pretty interested in, you know, uh, the constant balancing game you have to play as a startup, right? With speed
Mm-hmm.
versus like longevity is very interesting. And I actually haven't been in a management position of an organization this size on this trajectory, the growth trajectory
Sure.
before. So it is kind of a learning experience for me as well, as is many days being a manager. But the good news is if things go the way want. Ideally, right? We're going to experience continued rapid growth. That's the goal for a small startup, is to grow our product, grow our services, and along with that, we have to grow the team to keep up. So I think there's no shortage of opportunity, and
Okay.
so that actually excites me, right? Like, good example, I have an individual on my team. I don't think he would mind me sharing. He's not going to be named, so it doesn't matter. Like, he wants to get into management.
Sure. Yeah.
We don't have management opportunities right now. We just don't. That's the reality. We're too small. What we need to do right now is build the product, grow the product, sell more of it, whatever.
Sure.
But when that happens, we are inevitably going to have more teams. So we're already having conversations about when we grow, what would that look like? Where are possible team splits?
Right.
Where would those happen? So that, like, hey, maybe there'll be a management opportunity. And it's kind of like it's this fun balancing act of making sure we set goals for the individuals on the team that are trying to grow without tying them to things that they have no control over.
Right.
It's like, hey, you can't set a goal to say I'll be managing, team Y in a year, because, like, we don't know if team Y is going to have the responsibility area you want, if they will even exist by that time. So it's not fair to set a goal around that. So
Right.
what we do is we seek goals for, hey, can you demonstrate growth in this kind of management skill set area? Can I give you opportunities to kind of step in and take some stuff off my plate here and now so you're ready? Um, but yeah, what that means is, as we're thinking into the future about that growth, we know the people who are here today are
Right.
going to be gaining experience throughout that whole time. And I'm hella excited about being able to invest in an internship program,
Right.
right? Like, you and I both got our starts through co-op and internship opportunities. And if you're anything like me, you want to pay that opportunity back to,
Totally.
the future generations. So tons of excitement there, giving junior engineers their break, investing in them. I think it's really exciting to have this kind of growth on the horizon,
Hmm.
because it can invest in that. So again, it's that balancing act of, um, we need specific skills to grow, but we want to be here for the long run.
Right.
And so to do that, you just need a spectrum of experience, and I don't know what the word is for it, across the junior, intermediate, senior scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Like it's got to be across that spectrum. There has to be some type of balance. It can't just be like everyone is 100% junior. You only have like principal staff engineers. Like there's got to be some continuity between all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's interesting as you're kind of sharing this about walking through this team that you have of three right now. I kind of see some definite parallels to the one of my two geos on this new team that I've acquired. Because they are smaller, similar composition, what you've been explaining. And for me, I'm thinking through like you, um, like what do I need for this team to be successful? And I don't think it's like, oh, like it is must find a principal engineer, must hire a intern. It's not the seniority kind of thing that I'm after, the role, the title. It's more about like I need to go. This is assuming unlimited budget, by the way, because that's a whole other thing. And budget isn't necessarily in my control. Depending on the time of the year and how the markets are, and of course, like there might be better or worse hiring opportunities. But I want to park that because it's not the driving force behind like what I would be after in an ideal state. So I do think that I would be more after like asking the team like, hey, like based on our roadmap, like where are you guys feeling gaps and where we're not able to kind of sustain some of this engineering effort, uh, or on call effort for like a service, right? Like where do you feel there are gaps and can we go try and explore hiring for that? Um, that would be how I'd like to focus on that geo. The other geo is almost the opposite, where I do think because there's a bunch of intermediates, I would be trying to look at like I don't, adding another intermediate or senior kind of person. I'm sure it's going to be helpful, but is it possible that I can say, look, I have a few individuals on this team that are starting to grow in their careers. Can I help support that by letting them kind of like be more of like a tech lead position? Maybe some folks that are kind of just getting into that senior kind of realm, like maybe it would be great if they did take on an intern and they get a little bit more exposure to like helping along. Um, there's a dog, awesome. Helping along, get some different experiences that are a bit more leadership focused. Um, so I think again, with unlimited budget in mind, if I could hire a couple more people, that's how I might look at it a little bit differently in that second geo, just for career development purposes.
Right. Right
Cool.
on. Well, we are certainly approaching an hour.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Did we cover a good
Yeah. Do you have anything that stood out to you as like maybe we could do a couple takeaways each and like if you're looking at building out a team, I don't necessarily think there's like a rule or something that you should prescribe, but like anything that kind of stands out as a couple different things you might consider.
yeah, I think for me, it's it's too re it's too much of a natural reaction or a natural instinct to think about like what do we need right now? Let's go get that.
Sure.
I think I have seen it, and it is common to be thinking exactly like that. And to the questions you were asking, do we need a senior person? Do we need a tech lead? Does this team need a tech lead? And I think the short game is yes, we need a tech lead, so let's go get one.
Hmm.
When the reality is, you might have some people around that aren't that far away from it. In our last conversation that we recorded, I talked about how I became a manager when I had no real business being a manager because I hadn't demonstrated any management skills.
Sure. Yep.
And so someone took that chance. And I think, I really believe that organizations too easily miss the internal opportunities for the want of, well, we need someone who can do the thing at this exact
Hmm.
moment. And you probably have someone who can do the thing. They just haven't been given an opportunity to demonstrate it. So, um, I really think taking a breath for a second, uh, trying to play more than just the short game will help you assess not just what skills do we need today to solve today's pain points, because those are going to go away. But what are the longer term visions for this team around the types of problems they solve, how you want to work? And then you start thinking about what kinds of skills do I want to hire for today, but ones that have legs into tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And so that is, do you have to hire that lead, that senior, that staff? Do you have to hire, a front end or a back end engineer? Um, and just starting to yeah, look farther out and think about the kind of team you want to have, because you're making the decisions that set this team up to be the team you want to be in the future.
Yeah,
So um,
that's a really good way to put it, right? Like you're making decisions about what your team is growing into. Yeah, so yeah, I think as you were kind of, saying your perspective there, I think probably summarized it better than I would have wanted to, but I think a couple things I wanted to touch on were like in terms of skill sets, like and even in your example that you were giving, you're like, I am looking for particular skill sets, and I think that's totally fine, but you're not going into it like narrow sighted and like with blinders on being like, boom, as long as I only have this skill set hired. It's like, no, you're thinking about this person probably has to have, what I wanted to touch on was like this generalist kind of feel, like being able to jump into other things. I think that's extremely important. I think even more important in a startup environment or small teams that are a lot more nimble. Like if you're not able to learn quick, jump into stuff, be uncomfortable, um, it almost doesn't even matter what's like skill you have. But if you can come to the table with a skill that's going to benefit the team, great. But I wouldn't say like rely on only that, and that's going to be the thing that excels you into the future only. Like no, it's going to be this being a team player and working on other stuff. And the other part that I just wanted to touch on is like, and Graham, you talked about this a lot in our conversation today, but like like leveling up your team. Like I don't know how to stress that enough, but looking at your team and being like, cool, we want to bring some strength to the team. Like we want to make sure we're getting better, we're delivering higher quality, maybe at a faster pace, whatever the metric is, and going, cool, just got to hire a staff engineer, just got to hire a principal engineer, like problem solved. No, like think instead, like how can you invest in the people on your team? Like um, one of the things, and I don't know if this is maybe a lot of the experience that I have personally is from startup land, right? Like the domain knowledge that those people are growing with the company, I think is almost priceless. So you bring on someone that's like a principal or staff engineer to start having some direction, and they don't come with that domain knowledge in the area that you're in. You probably have some people on your team that maybe don't have as much experience in maybe the other, like the rest of the workforce. Maybe this is the first or second place they've worked at, so they're only intermediate or maybe just senior, not staff or principal, but they come with so much domain knowledge that it's almost like it's priceless, right? And you start putting people over top of them and not giving them an opportunity. I think that's a mistake, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for leveling those people up.
This is organizationally true. I mean, we're speaking as engineering managers that have IC engineers reporting to us. But this works upwards too, right? I've experienced nothing more disheartening in my career to date than wanting to be a manager at organizations that continue to hire in externally to fill in all of the skills gaps they want in their management level without giving any opportunities to those of us in the organization asking to and striving to get into that position.
Yep.
And as you become a senior manager and you have managers reporting to you, or a director and you have managers and senior managers reporting to you, or whatever the structure is, it's too easy to say, hey, we got to go make this new team. Guess we got to go hire a manager for it. But who on that team has all the domain knowledge that's going to be, fantastic to help carry that team forward? And if they want to dabble
Yeah.
in engineering management, right?
Yeah.
Try it out. You can always hire later. But to fill that seat with someone external is potentially not just missing an internal opportunity, but potentially turning away or driving away those that you have around you. So
Yeah, 100% agree with that. So, yeah, personally, just to wrap up my part, I just don't think there's enough emphasis on trying to build up your team to maybe fill some of those gaps that you're looking to hire for. So, that's just something else I wanted to touch on. Um,
right on.
but yeah, I think no, thanks, Graham. I think this is awesome. Like I said before, I'm always excited to be able to sit down and talk with you. We have similar and different experiences, right? We haven't worked at the same company together in a while, but we seemingly have stuff that comes up where it's very relevant for both of us. So this is great.
Yeah, my hope is if it's relevant for us, it's relevant for others. So
Exactly, yeah. So again, thanks if you're listening on Spotify or other streaming services. Hopefully you can tune in the future. If you're watching this on YouTube, really helps if you can like the video, subscribe to the channel if you think this is useful information. Drop comments and ask us questions too. I think not only does it help the algorithm, but it also lets us know like if this stuff is like aligned with what you're kind of focused on. If there's topics that are relevant, we'd love to kind of hear from you as well to know. Because odds are, if it's relevant for Graham and I, like he said, it's going to be relevant for you. So.
yeah,
So awesome, thanks, and Graham, I will talk to you sometime soon.
sounds good.
Okay,
See you later.
see ya.